The bell above the door at the Blue Aster Diner had a nervous ring, as if it too understood that everything in this place existed on the edge of breaking. Morning light slipped through blinds that had lost their desire to close properly, drawing. Slanted bars across chrome and coffee. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. Rhea Calder pressed a palm against the counter to steady the coffee pot and herself, poured 2 black refills with a practiced tilt, and said, "Thank you for the 1,000th time to people who rarely looked up long enough to hear it. It wasn't the tips that kept her here, though they mattered desperately. It was the thin, stubborn loyalty she felt to a room that had fed her during the worst year of her life, a place that demanded exactly what she had: endurance. The booths held truckers who measured loneliness in miles, traveling nurses who kept their lanyards tucked into their jackets like secrets, and men who counted the quiet between shifts like a handful of coins. The diner listened and steamed and forgave. Rhea had learned to do the same. She moved down the line of regulars like a heartbeat, pour, nod, grin, hand on shoulder, pour, while her mind ran its own ledgers. Rent due in 12 days, electricity in 5, her younger sister's text from last night. "Any chance you can help with Mom's meds?" Rhea had stared at the message until the dots stopped pulsing, then typed, "Of course," because that was who she intended to be, no matter how tight the month got. "Table 6, called Tyler from the pass, sliding up a plate of pancakes with butter, making a small, shining lake on top. "And tell them if they ask for more whipped cream, I'm going to legally change my name and vanish." Rhea smiled, caught the plate, and flowed through the narrow aisle like water, body half-turned to dodge a man's backpack, an elbow, a rushing line cook, carrying a tray that smelled like cinnamon and frying. The bell rang again, nervous, apologetic, and a gust of late October air punched through the diner, bringing in the smell of wet asphalt and gasoline. She noticed him before she saw him, felt the quiet that arrived when someone entered who didn't yet belong. The door eased shut behind a leather jacket that had seen more weather than most roofs. He removed his helmet with careful hands, a man touching the only expensive thing he owned, and the light caught the silver in his beard. For one soft second, there was a patch on the shoulder, not a club's emblem, nothing she recognized. Just a square of faded cloth with a stitched raven. No swagger, no noisy entrance, just the watchful way some creatures enter the edges of a clearing. Ready to retreat if the wind changes wrong. Rhea set down pancakes at 6, laughed with the teenagers about Tyler's legal name change, took an order for a Denver omelette that would never be as good as the one the man's grandmother used to make, and let herself not look at the newcomer for as long as she could. He slid into the last booth by the windows, the one that spent its days being bathed and then abandoned by light. He placed the helmet on the vinyl seat opposite him, like he was saving someone a place who never arrived. "Be right with you," she called. Her voice came out warm, as if the cold he carried pressed her to be kinder. She touched a hand to the pocket of her apron and felt the folded post-it tucked there, the month's goals in dull pencil. $400 extra, 2 double shifts, no crying in the walk-in, and turned toward him with a smile she meant. Up close, he looked younger than the grey suggested, or maybe just the kind of tired that erases ages. His eyes held that skittish, polite hunger Rhea recognized from nights after her father left, a hunger that sensed the price of everything and the cost of asking anyway. "Coffee," she said, "if it's not trouble." His voice had the gravel of long distance. He kept one hand curved around the laminated menu, but did not look at it. His eyes were on the windows, where rain began pinning bright needles into the glass. "It never is," she poured. The scent rose between them like an offering and softened his shoulders. "What can I start you with?" He glanced at the menu. Then, as if he owed it the respect of being considered, His fingertip drifted over pictures of food the kitchen did not always exactly replicate, the way time sanded down promises to something usable. "What's good?" "A trick question," she said. "I could say the pancakes, and then you'd order something else out of spite." He smiled, quick, reluctant joy, as if humor surprised him when it worked. "The pancakes it is," he said. "If you think Tala, the chef, won't hunt me for asking for too much whipped cream." "Tala wants to be hunted," Rhea said. "It proves she exists." She wrote, "Pan short stack, bacon." And then, because something in the slope of his shoulders asked, she added banana without charging the 50 cents she was supposed to. "Anything else?" He hesitated. He was not a man who hesitated often. His hands bore the nicked history of choosing quickly and living with the result. "How much is the breakfast special?" $8.95, she said. She didn't look at his jacket, the scuffed boots, the way his helmet had been rubbed smooth on one side by years of swinging it against a hip. She did not look at his eyes either, because she could feel the calculation happening inside them, the way he measured $8.95 against something that wouldn't stretch. "I'll just do the pancakes," he said, and passed the menu. Back as if he were surrendering the rest of his appetite for safekeeping. She took the menu, and his smile carried both to the pass and slid the ticket onto the line. Tala glanced up and raised an eyebrow. "Did you charge him for the bananas?" Rhea leaned on the shelf. "You and I both know bananas are a human right." "This isn't a democracy," Tala said, but she smirked as she flipped the pancakes and reached for the sugar. "It's a benevolent dictatorship with excellent syrup." The lunch rush arrived like a tide. The teenager with the complicated omelette hated tomatoes, but loved ketchup. An old truth Rhea no longer resisted. The traveling nurse needed a to-go cup and extra creamers for the road. Someone paid in quarters and $2 bills. Someone left. A Bible tract as a tip and then, guilty, a 5. Rhea moved through it, the diner at her back, the room she pushed forward with smiles and refills and small mercies. She kept half an eye on the booth by the window. When the pancakes came up, stacked like a promise under a cap of whipped cream that Tala would deny making, Rhea carried them carefully, aware that sometimes the difference between surviving and not was whether the food arrived warm. She slid the plate before him. He straightened. "You didn't have to," he began, meaning the banana, the extra cream, the kindness she hoped disguised itself as banter. "I did, actually," she said. "It's in the code." He ate like a man who had waited for the permission to begin. Not rushed, he was too well trained by hunger to insult food with haste, but with a seriousness that thanked every bite. When the plate was clean, he folded his napkin slowly, as if listening to something other than the rain. Rhea sensed it then, the weight of the moment approaching like weather. She set down the check. It was the smallest of actions, the lightest rectangle of paper, but it thudded on the table in her mind. He glanced at the total, his mouth tightened the barest fraction. He reached for his back pocket, checked the left, checked the jacket. A date of expression crossed his face. Hope, then surprise, then the kind of stillness that follows when you realize the thing you need is not where you left it. "Oh," he said softly, to himself, not to her. He looked up at Rhea, and in his eyes she saw it, the math, the apology, the old shame. "I must have," he swallowed. "I filled up a little out on 17. I had cash in my—" The corner of his mouth twitched with the awareness of how ordinary this error was and how it could still split a person open. He set his palms flat on the table like a man steadying himself on a ship that had slid sideways. "Hey," Rhea said gently, before his hands could curl into fists against himself. "It's okay." "No," he said, equally gentle, but with a steel she recognized, the kind that kept a person upright in storms and also kept them from reaching for help. "It's not." "Then it's fixable," she said. Hang on. She reached for the check, as if that could unmake it. He covered it with his hand, not to stop her, but to keep from letting go of the world entirely. Every muscle in his forearm was a plain confession. My bike's out there, he said, nodding toward the rain. My phone's in the saddlebag. I can call someone, I can... Rhea shook her head. Words formed in her chest with the clarity of choices she would not regret. You ate, she said. You're warm. That's the transaction I care about. He blinked. She watched the words. Reach him and find the place inside that had prepared for everything but this. I'll come back, he said too quickly now, the promise, like a life vest he needed her to take so he could breathe. I'll come back with the money, and more than that. I'm not, I know you're not. She eased the check back. Toward her, folded it, slid it into her apron next to the post-it that whispered, "No crying in the walk-in." You're not a thief. You're not taking. You're passing through. She looked at his hands, the long bones, the small scars. And if passing through means you needed the pancakes more than I need $8.95, then I'm good with that math. The silence between them had the clean, stunned quality of snow. He exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. What's your name? He asked. He'd asked the question as if it mattered to him in a way most people's. Names didn't, Rhea. He nodded, then seemed to decide that names ought to be exchanged fairly. Caleb. It was nice to meet you, Caleb. She stepped back, sensing that mercy tasted better without witnesses. Get dry before you go. He slid out of the booth. He picked up his helmet and stood there unsure of what to do with his hands, then offered one as if they were at a door. She had just held open, and he lacked any other language for gratitude. Rhea shook it. His grip was warm and careful. He looked like a man trying not to be seen thanking someone too much. At the register, Mr. Thatcher's eyes narrowed, the way a dog's ears cut toward a sound you can't yet hear. Problem? Asked his tone, the brittle kind managers used when they'd already decided there was one. Thatch wore his tie like a weapon. He kept a blue pen above his ear and an audit in his gaze. No problem, Rhea said, low. I comped it. Thatch's mouth tightened. You what? Comped, she repeated, as if the word might grace the counter with a little magic if said twice. He forgot his wallet. I made a call. We are not a charity. Thatch's voice could have cut butter frozen in the dead of February. You don't comp without checking with me. I just did, Rhea said evenly. She kept her smile soft because anything harder would be a fight. You hired me to read the room. And in your reading, we run on what? Goodwill and Goodwill's cousins? He pinched the bridge of his nose. We're barely covering. Invoices as it is, Calder. We're also barely losing $8.95, she said softly, aware of the delicate calculus she performed every shift. Kindness, money, dignity, heat. He was hungry. I fed him. I'll make it up. You'll make it up, Thatch repeated, like a man tasting an ingredient and deciding it ruined the dish. Out of your tips, if I have to. He glanced at the door where Caleb paused to settle his helmet, then back at Rhea. If he comes back, he pays. If he comes back, she said, and did not add, I hope he does, because hope had a way of costing extra. Caleb lifted a hand in a brief, almost embarrassed wave. Rhea returned it. He disappeared into rain that swallowed sound and turned the world outside into a smear of chrome and water. Take table 9, Thatch said, because resentment never stopped the machine. It only made more noise inside it. And tighten up. The comping. This isn't a church potluck. She nodded and moved, memory already filing the moment into the place where she kept other small rebellions that had become parts of her spine. She told herself the truth she clung to on nights she couldn't sleep, that money was a way to measure things, but kindness measured people, and she was choosing the currency she could live with. The days that followed were wet-backed and long, A storm rolled through and stalled, as if the sky itself had clocked in at the diner and couldn't find an excuse to leave. The bell rang for truckers, for a soaked marching band, for a woman crying into her phone who ordered soup and never touched it. Ria spoke to all of them in the same voice she used to steady her sister during panic attacks. Level, warm, with room inside it for whatever needed to sit and breathe. One night after close, her sister video-called from their mother's small apartment. The background was the grainy floral of a couch that had once been green. "She's sleeping," Lila whispered, tilting the camera down at the shape beneath the blanket. "Thank you for the meds." "Always," Ria said. She turned her back to the dining room so Lila wouldn't see the stack of unpaid invoices, stacked under the register like a dare. "How are you?" "Better because of you." Lila hesitated. "Are you okay?" Ria's smile lifted the way a kite lifts when the wind is stubborn, angled, effortful. "I'm good." The next morning, a florist's van parked crooked in the lot, and the driver carried in a small arrangement of wildflowers and a card for R. Calder. Ria's first thought was Mom, her second was Lila, and her third, arriving late. And trying not to hope loudly, was Caleb. She opened the card with hands that had lifted other people's burdens, so often she sometimes forgot they were hers too. "Thank you." No number, no name, no return address. Just those 2 words in handwriting that tried to be tidy and failed in a charming way, like someone who had trained himself to be left alone, learning the shape of his own gratitude. Tala admired the flowers. Secret admirer or a grateful stomach? Ria tucked the card into her apron and told Tala the truth she could touch. Both. The rumor engine of the diner warmed up. Regulars asked about the man in the leather jacket. Had he paid? Did she know him? Was he trouble? Ria answered with a shrug that meant she was on everyone's side. She wiped tables with care that contemplated more significant work, keeping the edges of people's lives from fraying when they sat in her section. On a wet Saturday that never quite became afternoon, the bell rang with a jangling that went slightly off-key. Ria looked up to see a man she'd never met and yet recognized immediately, Mr. Thatcher's boss. He had the laminated smile of a regional manager and a clipboard that could sink a restaurant. He introduced himself with a handshake that grabbed too much, then surveyed the room with kind curiosity that had nowhere to land. "We're reviewing comp policies," he announced, a sentence that made Tala whistle low and Ria's stomach do something between a lurch and a sigh. "Margins are margins. I'll be watching tickets." Thatch shot Ria a behave look. She returned it with a watch me look that she wore only on days when she remembered she'd survived worse than a bad performance review. The lunch rush reached a dizzy, jostling peak. The register hiccuped, the printer jammed, a kid spilled. A chocolate milkshake so perfectly it looked staged. In the corner booth, a couple spoke with soft anger, the kind that hums just under polite decibels. The rain relented, and then decided it missed the roof and came back. Ria kept breathing and moving until her feet forgot they were tired and became the idea of work itself. At 2:17, the storm that had lived over the highway all week finally broke apart and rolled its shoulders. The clouds thinned. A thin stripe of blue unzipped the grey. Ria heard it before she understood it, a distant growl that joined the day from a horizon she could not see. The sound rose, multiplied, gathered like a distant train, unstitching itself from myth and becoming metal. Tala stepped out from behind the pass and frowned toward the windows. "What is that?" Ria's heart did a small, irrational lift. She thought of the card in her apron, the careful letters, the way "thank you" sometimes grew legs and travelled. "Bikes," she said, before she could confirm it. The sound was a swarm that purported to be order, engines harmonizing into a chorus, heads tilted, conversation thinned. People set their forks down without meaning to, as if the noise rearranged gravity. Thatch came to the front and looked out into the parking lot. His professional smile blurred. He said a word that did not belong in the training manual. Rhea moved toward the glass and saw them emerging like a weather system. 1, then 5, then 20, then a line that became a river. Chrome and black and flashes of red. Denim vests and patched jackets wet from the long ride, helmets under arms, boots that had met deserts and mountains and all the roads between. The parking lot filled with men and women whose bodies said, "We go where we mean to." The first rows eased into spots. Others formed an imperfect, obedient line along the curb. Engines idled like big cats purring. The nearest jackets bore patches Rhea did recognize, at least enough to name, winged skulls. The rocker letters that even people who had never seen a club up close knew how to read. Tala made a sound between a laugh and a prayer. Mr. Thatch stepped closer to Rhea as if she were an umbrella, and he did not want to admit he was afraid of rain. The door opened. The bell tried to ring above the roar and failed, ringing instead like a charm on a giant's wrist. 2 men came in first, veterans by the way the room adjusted, letting them set the weather. They didn't swagger. They carried their presence like the disciplined weight it was. The taller man's eyes swept the room without threatening it, cataloguing exits and moods. He had the calm of a person who had been in chaotic places and learned to be the opposite of them. A third rider slipped in behind them, shaking rain off the cuffs of a jacket. He had a square of faded cloth on the shoulder, a stitched raven. He took off his helmet slowly, the way some men do when they are entering a place where they hope to be forgiven. Rhea's breath stopped in her throat as if it were a thing that could see and needed to hide. Caleb's hair was damp, his beard pressed flat where a helmet had asked it to be disciplined. His eyes found her in the way magnets find each other, with relief, inevitability, and a small measure of awe that the world had not made it harder. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He only looked at her as if asking a question he wasn't sure he deserved to ask. "Do you remember me?" She felt her own mouth lift without permission. "Yes." The tall rider stepped forward. He set a gloved hand on the counter. The room had turned down its volume, the way a congregation does when a new anthem begins. "Afternoon," he said. His voice was rough velvet. "We're going to need coffee, a lot of it." Rhea found her voice resting where she'd last left it, behind the register, with the courage she wore to work like a necklace under her shirt. "We've got pots," she said, "and patience." "Good," he said, and his mouth crooked, like a man who didn't often allow himself the pleasure. "We've got both kinds of hunger." He glanced at Caleb, just a flicker but full of a story, and then back at Rhea. "He says this is the place." Rhea looked down at her hands, because looking at Caleb too directly made something in her chest unfold that had not been allowed to move for a long time. She set out mugs. Tala brought plates like a warrior bearing shields. Thatch started counting. Chairs, as if that could build more of them. The riders filed in, not like a raiding party, not like a threat, but like a family that understood how to take up space without breaking it. They shed rain, shook laughter free from their collars, set helmets along the sill like moons. Someone thanked Rhea for the warmth with a sincerity that surprised her, as if warmth were not a thing any room owed its guests. Caleb waited until the surge moved past. He approached the counter like a man walking back to a house he'd helped build long ago, and then left for reasons he didn't fully understand. He rested his hands on the edge, the way he had rested them on the laminate table over pancakes. "You wouldn't let me pay," he said, low. "I told them that." "I remember," Rhea said. He nodded once, swallowed, and the motion showed the scar along his jaw. Thin, clean, earned. "They do too." He shifted, and Rhea felt rather than saw the rider at his shoulder, the tall one, the calm one, place a heavy envelope on the counter between them. Thatch leaned in, his pen above his ear, suddenly looking like an accessory rather than a weapon. The envelope sat there like a promise, with weight. Rhea's hand moved toward it and then stopped. The diner was very quiet. The rain hushed itself, as if weather also listened when the shape of a day bent. The tall rider tapped the envelope lightly. "From the road," he said. "From, let's call it, a chapter of people who were taught a long time ago that debts are sacred and kindness is the only religion worth arguing about." His smile cut sideways. "We heard there was a waitress who understood both." Rhea looked at Caleb. He was not looking at the envelope. He was looking at her like someone who had brought a piece of truth back to the place where he'd first been trusted with it. Her throat burned. She slid the envelope closer and felt it thump, with the sort of generosity that embarrasses money. "How much coffee is a lot of coffee?" she asked. Because if she didn't talk, she might cry in the walk-in before she made it there. "Enough to keep us from remembering our names," the tall rider said, then added softer, "and enough to remind us of them." He gestured toward the room where laughter had risen carefully, like a deer stepping into a clearing. "We'll be here a while." Rhea tucked the envelope under the register where she kept the fragile things. She picked up the pots and began to pour. The bell had not stopped ringing, but now it sounded like it might be enjoying itself. Tala's grumbling turned into a rhythm. The grill sang. The window fogged with the breath of people who had been on the road and decided to make a warm place part of their map. Rhea moved faster than she thought she could move, and softer than she knew how to be. And every time she poured for Caleb, she did not look too long at his hands, which could have been a life, and once, briefly, were. At a corner table, a woman with silver hair under a bandana pressed Rhea's fingers and said, "He told us you didn't make a show of it." "No," Rhea said. "Hunger doesn't like the spotlight." "Neither do we," the woman said, and smiled as if that were a joke with teeth. Half an hour later, when the room had settled into an impossible normal, 250 riders, finding manners where the world insisted they had none. Tala throwing pancakes across plates like frisbees of salvation. Thatch pretending not to be moved, Rhea returned to the register and slid the envelope open with the edge of her nail. She had not meant to count it. She had meant to leave it folded and untouched, the way some gifts want to remain symbols. But the corner caught, and a spill of green whispered like leaves at the beginning of summer. Tala drifted closer, curiosity worn without apology. Thatch hovered like an anxious weather balloon. Rhea flipped a small stack with fingers that belonged to someone steadier. She counted quickly, quietly, as if the bills might startle and run. Her breath altered itself a few measures. She looked up at Tala, who had seen her through nights when the only thing they'd had to split was a single orange and a bad joke. "Tala," she said, and the name was a prayer. "This," Tala's eyes moved from the cash to Rhea's face, and back. "How much?" Rhea swallowed. The number lived in her chest, like a soft explosion. 10,000. The words came out not as triumph, but as awe, the way you say the name of a mountain when you realize you've been climbing it. By accident for years. Tala exhaled hard enough to fog the glass over the pie case. She tried to swear and failed, landing on stars. Thatch made a sound like an account coming back from the dead. He ran a hand backward through his hair, knocking the pen from behind his ear. It hit the floor, a tiny, comic punctuation to the sentence of his astonishment. Rhea pressed the envelope to the counter as if to root it, to keep it from floating away into the realm of unreal kindnesses. She looked up. Caleb watched her from where he stood near the end of the counter, not close enough to intrude, not far enough to pretend he wasn't waiting to see what she did with the weight they had brought her. She did not hold the envelope. Up like a trophy, she did not announce the number to the room. She placed her hand over the bills, then over her own chest, which had become a house where gratitude lived, with the sort of lease no landlord could ruin. She nodded once, like a small bow to the afternoon. Caleb's mouth lifted. The smile looked like a ruin made beautiful by moss, something time had battered and kindness had insisted on dressing anyway. And then the door opened again. The bell rang brightly as if to say, "Attention, please." And the afternoon pivoted. A man stepped through, not part of the wave that had just arrived. Suit, cheap, the kind of cologne that turns heads for the wrong reasons. He had a clipboard, the twin of the one the regional manager had carried, but his smile was not corporate. It was a calculated knife. He took 2 steps into the warmth, saw the riders, and recalculated his strategy so quickly Rhea saw the math happen along his jaw. He turned his smile to Thatch first. Then he saw the envelope under Rhea's hand, and his pupils sharpened like a predator's catching light. "Afternoon," he said, voice amicable as a parking ticket. He flipped his clipboard to the second page, where a deputy's seal sat like a thumbprint. "I'm here on behalf of the landlord. We've been patient, but patience has a lease like everything else." He tapped the paper, looked from Thatch to Rhea, and then to the register. "Notice to vacate." The room tightened. Tala's spatula halted mid-air. The riders went very quiet in the way wolves do when they hear branches break in the wrong pattern. Caleb's hands flattened on the counter, close to Rhea's, but not touching. The man lifted the notice like a magician showing a card. "You've got 72 hours?" He smiled wider, the teeth showy and unkind. "Unless, of course, you've managed a small miracle this afternoon." His eyes flicked to the envelope, curiosity feigning politeness, greed keeping count. Rhea felt the weight beneath her palm like a heartbeat. $10,000, a room full of people who could become either storm or shelter, and a future she had just been handed in cash, pressed against a threat written in legalese. She looked at Caleb. He was already looking at her, waiting, steady, as if she were the person in the room he trusted to decide what kind of story this moment would be. The clipboard gleamed. The bell above the door settled from its last ring, one small metal tongue resting after a long sermon. Rhea inhaled once, gathering steam, courage, coffee, rain, and every quiet rebellion she had ever tucked into the pocket of an apron. She lifted her hand from the envelope and opened her mouth to answer. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story." Rhea did not blink. The clipboard's edge gleamed like a dare. She lifted her hand from the envelope as if she were taking her palm off a pulse and setting the beat instead. The room held still around her. Tala, statue still with a spatula, Mr. Thatch working his jaw like gum he'd never meant to chew, the riders, a weather front of quiet attention, Caleb, steady as a lamppost at her shoulder. "I hear you," Rhea said to the man with the notice. "But before you finish that sentence, you should probably look at this." She slid the envelope onto the counter, not fanning the bills, no spectacle, no theatre, just setting the weight of it between paper threat and lived community. He cocked his head, amused in a way that had nothing to do with humour. "What is that? A tip jar with ambition?" "Rent," Rhea said. "Back rent, current month, a good faith bite out of next, and a security that says we're not who your spreadsheet thinks we are." The man's smile faltered. Predators dislike prey that reads contracts out loud. He plucked the envelope with 2 fingers and flipped the flap. The whisper of bills made the room's air feel greener. He counted messily, then carefully. He counted again, the way men do when their certainty starts to melt around the edges. "How much is this?" 10,000, Rhea said. "Today." He flicked his gaze to Thatch for confirmation, to a man who had not known until that second what had arrived on his counter, and to Rhea, who looked like a force he'd underestimated, and to the riders who did not move but somehow took up more space. "Your ledger says we owe 8, Thatch said hoarsely. He'd come around to Rhea's side without noticing that. He'd crossed a line he'd drawn himself. Plus late fees, which are negotiable, Rhea added, and which you just found got their feelings hurt. The man pinched his lips. He slid the notice back into his clipboard, as if it might burn him now. Late fees are stipulated, he said, clinging to the script. And there's the matter of the landlord's intent to sell. The words hit the room like a tray dropped. In the kitchen, Tala swore softly, a flourish that sounded like a blessing delivered backwards. Intent to sell, Rhea repeated, tasting each word. To whom? Not your concern. He smiled again, restoring plastic to his face. Your lease is month to month. The building's old. The neighborhood is. He glanced at the window where bikes glittered with rain. Changing. We are the change, Rhea said, and we pay what we owe. She pushed the envelope back toward him, refusing to look to Thatch for permission that she did not need. Take it. Mark us current. Give us a receipt that says exactly that. He hesitated, miscalculating the risk of refusing money in a room where 250 witnesses could testify to his foolishness. He slid out a generic form and wrote with a pen that tried to look expensive, but skipped like a child learning cursive. Received 10,000 dus rent arrears, Blue Aster Diner. He signed the landlord's name with a flourish that made Rhea's skin crawl, tore the slip, and pushed it across the counter. Rhea took it without looking down, because looking down was a win he did not deserve. Now, she said, about your 72 hours. He tucked the envelope inside his clipboard like a small animal conquered. The notice stands while the landlord explores options. Payment doesn't erase intent. He cleared his throat, well aware of the room's attention. I'll let them know you paid. That will factor. Let them know this too, said the tall rider, voice like velvet wrapped around a crowbar. We ate here. We were treated like neighbors. We will be back. Often. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Developers don't like neighbors with long memories. The man decided he had had enough of the diner's weather. He turned and found his path to the door slowed, not by bodies. No one blocked him, but by the gravity in the room shifting just a notch heavier. He slipped through anyway, the bell letting out a bright, insincere ring as if to say, "We saw you." The door settled. The room exhaled. Tala set her spatula down with a clack that sounded like a period. Coffee, someone said. Maybe Caleb. Maybe the room itself. Rhea smiled at a child who had climbed into her own section and asked if motorcycles could be friends. Yes, Rhea said, and poured, especially when they share syrup. The next hour was a whirl with edges softened. By wonder, the riders ate without hurry and without waste. They bussed their own tables with a care that would have made a church picnic proud. They thanked Tala. They thanked Thatch. They thanked Rhea so many times she began to feel like the word had a weight you could lift instead of a noise you made. End. The quiet pockets where the clatter lowered, Rhea felt the tremor of the future walking along the counter like a cat testing boards. 10,000 bought them time, not safety. But time had a way of turning into safety if you used it like a tool and not a pillow. Caleb helped a toddler reach the pie case to identify, with grave certainty, which dessert had the most magic in it. He didn't overstep. He didn't perform. He stood and waited and was exactly himself in a room that had decided who he was before he entered, and then learned it had been wrong. He caught Rhea's eye once, just once, and tipped his chin, an apology for bringing a storm that turned. Out to be rain the parched ground needed. She shook her head, a tiny thank you that could have filled a ballroom. By 3, the riders began to pull on jackets damp at the cuffs. Someone left a note folded into the sugar caddy. For the next kid who needs a hot chocolate and can't pay. Someone else fixed the hinge on the bathroom door in silence. The tall rider pressed a card into Thatch's palm with a look that made men keep cards. If anyone bothers this place for the wrong reasons, call. When the last helmets tucked under arms and the last boots crossed the threshold, the bell rang in a tone that sounded almost proud. The engine started not like a threat, but like a promise to keep moving. The lot thinned. The road caught them and stitched their sound into distance. The diner hummed with the residue of what people carry out of a sanctuary. Less fear, more breath. Thatch sat down hard on a stool, as if the gravity in the room had shifted for him too. He rubbed his face, then looked at Rhea with a kind of helpless, reluctant admiration. "You terrify me," he said. "Only on days that end in Y," she said, and let herself lean on the counter. Just for a second, Tala appeared with a clean dish towel and the grin of a woman who had just survived a tornado by serving it pancakes. "If I had known benevolent dictatorship came with a cavalry, I would have been nicer to my subjects." Rhea laughed, light and startled. It felt like a bell rung inside her ribs. They closed that night, with hands that did not ache as much as they should have. The receipt sat in the register like a talisman. Rhea took a photo of it with her phone, not for Instagram, not for anyone's feed, but to send to her sister with the caption, "A miracle in drip coffee and chrome. Sleep tonight." Lila wrote back a heart and a voice note that said, "Through tears, I knew it. I knew if kindness were a religion, you'd be ordained." Rhea plugged in the neon clock, whose cord always wiggled loose from the outlet, checked the lock twice, and stepped into night damp with the smell of fresh pavement. Caleb stood by his bike, helmet under his arm, as if waiting to confirm the diner did not disappear when the lights went out. "I should have told you who I was," he said when she approached, keeping his voice low like they were standing at the edge of a sleeping lake. "Or who I am. I didn't because I didn't want the name to walk into the room before I did." "You're Caleb," Rhea said. "I met you first." He breathed out something like relief. "Some of the guys ride under a name people have stories about. Some of the stories are true. Some are ghosts that get fed until they turn into wolves. He flicked his eyes toward the highway, where red taillights had become a string of beads. "We try to be careful about where we bring our weather." "You brought rain to a dry field," Rhea said. "We'll grow something with it." He startled at that. Men who've carried shame startle at blessings, and nodded, swallowing. "There's more coming," he said. "Not just us, pressure. The suit wasn't lying about the cell. Folks have been sniffing around this block for a while. A new development want to wrap its arms around the riverfront. Places like this get called transitional." Rhea let the word sit before she corrected it. "We're not the part you pass through. We're the part you arrive at." He smiled, small, like a sunrise deciding if it would commit. "If you need a hand that's legal, we know a lawyer who rides and a CPA who swears more than Tala. We can look at the lease." "Tala swears in full sentences," Rhea said. "I like this CPA already." He fitted his helmet, then paused. "We go north tomorrow, but I'll circle back, if that's okay." "It is," Rhea said, then added because honesty had built this day, and she intended to keep using it. "I'm glad you came back." He touched 2 fingers to the brim, an old salute made new by the hand that offered it, started the bike, and left the lot with a sound that somehow softened the night. Next morning, Rhea found the diner already awake when she arrived. The sign hummed faithfully, the coffee pot hissed like a kindly cat, and a handwritten flyer was taped crooked on the door. "Community meeting, save the Blue Aster, Sunday, 5 p.m. Bring ideas, not pitchforks." Tala pretended not to know whose handwriting it was. By mid-morning, the room held a different kind of busy, neighbors drifting in with folded notices, crumpled tax bills, stories about what had been bulldozed where their childhoods had played. A man from the barber shop down the block offered to do Save the Astor haircuts and donate the proceeds. A high schooler with a camera asked if he could film a short documentary. A kindergarten teacher wanted to host Thursday night reading. Circles in the back booth, under the broken jukebox that only played one song. Thatch tried to look put upon and failed delightfully. "We will need a calendar," he admitted, as if confessing a weakness, "and rules, and a mop schedule." "We already have a mop schedule," Tala said. "You just don't respect it." Rhea listened more than she spoke. She wrote names and numbers in a spiral notebook with small, careful letters and made a list in the margin called Money We Owe, and another called Money We Can Make Without Selling Our Souls. She kept glancing at the register to be sure the receipt still existed and hadn't been a trick the light played on her hope. At 4:58 on Sunday, the bell chimed like it had been waiting for a meeting all its life. People filled every chair and then stood along the wall like a choir that had outgrown its church. Rhea stood near the pass with Tala and Thatch, palms open to her sides like a person ready to receive and to give. "We're not a non-profit," Thatch began immediately. In over his head. "We're a diner." "We're a living room with pancakes," Tala corrected. Rhea lifted a hand and the room quieted with surprising trust. "We're a place," she said, "which is a bigger word than it looks. Places decide whether people belong." She looked at the faces, wrinkled, smooth, tired, hopeful, practical, fierce. "We belong to you, and you belong to each other. So we're going to do the unglamorous miracles. Read our lease, make a budget, raise what we need without letting anyone buy our name from us." Applause broke like a small storm. The barbershop man held up a jar with "Hands off our hash browns" sharpied on it. Laughter loosened shoulders. A lawyer in a denim jacket spoke about right of first refusal clauses and what month-to-month really meant. The CPA Tala had conjured swore creatively about predatory late fees and suggested a formalized tenant association for the whole block. A retired contractor offered to fix the back step and the gutter for free because he could not abide a sagging corner in a place that served decent cornbread. They built a plan, piece by brick-shaped piece. Tala scheduled a fundraiser breakfast. Stacks for the Astor. The high schooler promised a 3-minute video by Tuesday. Lila texted from their mother's apartment that she'd bake and bring something approximating brownies if the good Lord and butter both cooperated. The meeting ended like church. Clusters of people hugging awkwardly, someone crying behind. A napkin. The sound of chairs dragged back to tables with the comforting scrape of maintenance. The room thinned. The clock hummed. Rhea stood alone for a second and let the noise drain out of her ears until all that remained was her own breath and the hum of a neon sign that had decided to believe in itself again. Then the front door opened. The bell spoke once, and then seemed to listen. The man who stepped in wore the same suit as the notice bearer, but better tailoring. He carried no clipboard. His smile was not plastic. It was worse. It was the kind of smile money learns when it forgets the difference between people and pieces on a board. "Ms. Calder?" he asked, as if interviewing her for a job she had not applied for. "That's me," Rhea said, wiping her hands on her apron and stepping forward the way you step toward a dog that you are not yet sure is friendly. He offered a business card with the understatement of a quiet knife. "Henley Ward, Acquisitions, River and Ridge Development." The card was thick enough to roof a small shed. "I admire a community that can muster. I respect it. But admiration is not the same as altering a timeline. We've made an offer on this property." He let the words sit, savoring the way rooms tense when a wolf names the lamb. "The landlord has accepted." Rhea felt the floor under her shoes and trusted it anyway. "Accepted is not closed," she said. "We paid our arrears. We have a receipt. We're current." "You are? Ward said, almost kindly. And also, a notice stands. The sale includes an agreement to deliver the building vacant in 30 days. I'm here to offer you a soft landing. He nodded at the room, at the photo wall, at the sugar caddies labeled in Tala's angry cursive. You can take 3 months' rent as a relocation bonus and find a new kitchen somewhere else. We'll even help you move the neon sign. The block here is evolving. We do not want a soft landing, Rhea said, adrenaline turning her voice into a blade she had sharpened on 1,000 small humiliations. We want our home. Ward's smile didn't crack. Home is a feeling, he said, not an address. You've never been hungry, Tala said, stepping forward like punctuation. Because hunger is an address. Ward's eyes cooled. A degree, Ms. Calder, he said, choosing not to see Tala. I'm aware of your recent benefactors. And of the envelope. Money is flexible. Perhaps there's a number that buys your flexibility in return. Rhea remembered the boy who had asked if motorcycles could be friends, the old woman who'd left with a hot chocolate prepaid by a stranger, Caleb's careful way of standing near without covering her shadow. She thought of her mother's pill, organizer, Lila's useful laughter, the barbershop jar, the lawyer's denim jacket. She measured Ward's number against these and found it wanting. You're going to get a letter from our lawyer, Rhea said, amazed she had our lawyer now, and less amazed by how natural it felt in her mouth. And a call from our CPA, and a noise from this block that you will mistake for nuisance until you learn it is music. Ward tucked his card into his jacket pocket to show he didn't need to remember her. 30 days, he said. We break ground in spring. He turned. He paused at the door. A word of advice. Not all friends help. Some attract attention. You won't like... His eyes flicked toward the photo Rhea had taped up behind the counter. Caleb and the silver-haired woman laughing without apology. Make smart allies. He left with a bell that sounded suddenly too small. They sat with that for a while, the way you sit with a new diagnosis that still might be a misread test. That night, after the last plate was dried and the last promise. Noted in Rhea's spiral, she found Caleb's card under the register. No card, she realized. He had left no number, only the 2 words on the florist's note. Thank you. The absence of a way to reach him felt like an ache in a tooth. You forgot you had. She locked up. The street was damp and lit like a secret. Her phone buzzed, a number she did not recognize. She almost let it go, but something in the way the screen blinked felt like a thread tugging from far away. Rhea, said Caleb's voice when she answered, the sound of it eased by wind. I shouldn't have asked someone for your number, but I did. If that's a boundary, say so, and I'll build a fence. It's a gate, Rhea said. You can knock. Silence, then a smile she could hear. We're over the state line, he said, heading north, but I heard something. Thought you should hear it from me if it turns out to be more than talk. Her hand tightened on the phone. What? River and Ridge, he said. They don't play clean, they buy code. Not the law. Law is ink. I mean the guys with clipboards who decide whether your grease trap is a reason to shut your door. I heard a name, Ward. He stopped by, Rhea said. Offered to move our neon sign like he was due us a kindness in a war. Caleb swore softly, a word that felt like a blanket in its warmth and like a promise in its shape. They'll try to close you on paperwork, he said. You'll want your kitchen perfect. It's not perfect, Rhea said honestly. It's barely obedient. Then make it sing. And Rhea, he hesitated, don't be alone if they show up. She wanted to say, I have a city, wanted to say, I have Tala, Thatch, a jar labeled, hands off our hash browns, wanted to say, I have 10,000 in proof that the world isn't as cruel as it pretends. Instead, she said, I'm never alone. In here, they hung up with a piece that felt both fragile and armored. The next week was work that did not applaud itself. Tala and Thatch scrubbed like absolution. The retired contractor rebuilt the back step with quiet joy. The high schoolers' video went small-town viral. 30,000 views, and a dozen emails from cousins who hadn't spoken in years offering to call someone. Lila's brownies were, by some miracle of butter and prayer, magnificent. The lawyer filed a request for a temporary injunction on the notice, citing timely payment and community detriment. The CPA sent a letter about late fees that used the word usurious in a way that made Thatch clap in the walk-in. Team. Stacks 4. The Astor, whose people ate pancakes until the griddle glowed like a halo. Rhea worked the floor with a grace she did not question anymore. She said thank you until the words stopped being syllables and became a posture. When the inspector came, he wore the weary look of men who have spent too many days catching people, failing instead of finding ways to help them pass. He walked the line, he checked the freezer, he measured with a ruler that had seen more drama than it deserved. He frowned at the grease trap with the indulgence of a disappointed uncle. Needs servicing, he said, not optional. We scheduled, Thatch said, producing a paper that had been folded and unfolded so often it had become soft at the creases. Tuesday morning. The inspector nodded, then looked at the red tag sticker in his pocket as if it were a talisman he used only when absolutely necessary. Keep it clean until then, he said. He wrote, Re-inspection, WED 9M, on his clipboard and underlined it twice. Don't make me come back angry. Rhea exhaled for the first time in 6 minutes. We wouldn't dare. They wore that small reprieve, like a medal through the afternoon. Near close, rain returned with the patience of a loyal dog. The bell chimed. A figure stepped from the watery night. Soaked, irritated official. Not the inspector, not Ward. A man Rhea didn't recognize but felt immediately the wrongness of the energy around him. Too crisp, too eager for authority. Evening, he said. He flashed a badge so quickly it could have been a magic trick. City code compliance, anonymous complaint. He smiled like a trap. We've had reports of unsafe occupancy, congregation beyond permitted load, questionable clientele intimidating neighboring businesses. We take these things very seriously. Rhea grew very still. We have a posted capacity, she said. We respect it. We have receipts for last Sunday's fundraiser. We can provide them. He waved a dismissive hand, already walking the room like a man casing a pocket. We'll be conducting a spot check. If I find violations, I am authorized to issue an immediate closure pending hearing. His hand brushed the red tag in his pocket with a lover's familiarity. Behind Rhea, Tala drew herself to full height, which was not much, and somehow made the ceiling raise to accommodate her. Thatch stepped out from the back with a clipboard of his own, like a talisman against the dark. The regulars did what good congregations do. They stayed and became witnesses. The man prowled toward the kitchen. Rhea followed at his shoulder, palms open, voice even. Our inspector was here this morning, she said. We are scheduled for servicing. Different jurisdiction, he said. Different concerns. He reached the grease trap, crouched, with performative distaste, and peeled his red tag from its backing with theatrical slowness. The bell on the front door rang. Rhea didn't turn. She kept her eyes on the red. She could feel the room shift, the way it does when weather changes. Inside the walls, a quiet fell so total it was almost an object. The man's hand hovered with the tag, 3 inches from a future Rhea refused to accept. Miss Calder, said a voice from the doorway. Not Caleb, not Ward, not anyone she knew. Calm, low, carrying. Rhea looked up. 2 uniformed officers stood, just inside the door, not aggressive, not friendly, attentive. Between them, a woman in a navy blazer flashed a badge, not local, not code, not the kind of badge that enjoys small triumphs. Special Agent Mara Voss, she said. Department of Justice. She held up a sheath of papers. "We have questions for Mr. Henley Ward regarding alleged racketeering and municipal bribery related to River and Ridge development. We also have reason to believe certain code officers have been acting outside their remit at his instruction." Her eyes shifted to the man with the red tag. "Sir, your name?" The man swallowed. "Officer Pine, compliance." "Not anymore," Voss said, crisp as cold. She nodded to the officers. "Please escort Mr. Pine outside for a conversation." She turned to Rhea, her voice softening just enough to be human. "Ms. Calder, I'm sorry to bring this to your door unannounced. We'll need to ask you a few questions about any interactions you've had with Mr. Ward, and I'd like to speak with the gentleman in the photograph behind your counter." Her gaze paused on Caleb's laughing face. "We believe he may be a material witness in a separate matter." Rhea's pulse stuttered. She felt every eye in the room find her and then gently look away to give her privacy she didn't have. She gripped the counter to steady the future. "Where is he?" Agent Voss asked, polite, relentless. Rhea opened her mouth, caught between protection and truth, between the place she had built and the people who had saved it, between the kindness she owed and the law that had finally arrived, carrying its own. The red tag hung from the man's limp hand like a flag from a surrendered fortress. The bell above the door, for once, did not ring, and the phone in Rhea's apron began to buzz with an unknown number she suddenly terribly recognized. She answered. "Caleb?" His voice arrived like rain across a fireline. "Rhea, listen to me very carefully." And the agent lifted a hand, eyes narrowing at the name she had just heard, as two officers stepped closer to the counter. The line crackled. Caleb took a breath, as if bracing to jump. "They're coming for me. And if they think you can find me, they're coming for you." Rhea looked up into Agent Voss's waiting eyes and understood that the next words out of her mouth would decide whether the Blue Aster stayed a sanctuary or became the first casualty of a larger storm. She closed her eyes, just once, then opened them into a room that had chosen her. "I know where he is," she said, and the lights in the diner went out. How darkness swallowed the Blue Aster in a single stunned breath. The neon hum fell silent, the coffee maker sighed to sleep mid-hiss, and for one heartbeat Rhea felt the room become a cave that remembered fire. "Everyone stay calm, Agent," Voss said, voice steady as a metronome. Somewhere a flashlight clicked, a clean circle of white carving a path. Phones lit up like stars in pockets. Tala's swear slid across the room like a small bright boat. Rhea's phone was still at her ear. Caleb's breath was a thin thread across miles. "I heard something through a friend," he said, voice low, urgent. "Ward knew I was at your place. He wants me grabbed before I can talk. If they can't find me, they'll push you. Hard. Don't let them triangulate off your call." "Too late," Rhea whispered. Not to him, but to the air that already held Agent Voss's listening. "They're here." A thin green glow shivered back to life along the soda cooler. The emergency lights staggered on, feeble halos along the exits. In the soft illumination, Rhea could see Voss's eyes on her, assessing, not predatory, relentless, not cruel. "Ms. Calder," Voss said. "May I?" She lifted her hand, a gesture of request rather than demand. Rhea didn't pass the phone. She cupped it, thumb over the speaker, as if she were sheltering a candle. "You're not safe," she told Caleb, "but the only safety with teeth is the truth." "Truth has gotten me bit," he said, "more than once. Then we choose." "Where to bleed?" Rhea said. She lowered the phone an inch. "Agent Voss is here," she said aloud. The words pointed toward the room as much as the line. "She's investigating Ward. She thinks you matter." Silence on the line. Then Caleb. "She right there?" "Yes." A sound like resignation and resolve turned into an agreement. "Put her on." Rhea held his voice as if it were formed of glass and handed the call to Voss. The agent's expression did something rare, softened briefly with gratitude. She took the phone and stepped 2 paces aside, not out of earshot, but into a bubble of professionalism that respected Ria's. "Claim to the space. Caleb," Voss said. "I'm not using your last name yet because I don't need it to ask the first question. Are you safe?" She listened. "Good. We have Ward in our sights. We have evidence that he paid municipal officers to close kitchens that wouldn't sell, including this one. I need your account of a meeting on the riverfront 2 months ago, the one with the envelopes and the code names." Ria watched the room breathe. The regulars settled. Tala lit one of the emergency lanterns they kept under the pass and set it on the counter like a small portable day. Thatch fumbled for the breaker box with the reverence of a parishioner approaching a reliquary. Voss's tone changed, almost imperceptibly. "I understand," she said into the phone. "Then we'll do it this way. You tell me what you can. I'll corroborate. You keep moving. We'll meet when I can guarantee neutral ground." She glanced at Ria as if to say, "I won't burn your house to warm my hands." The power lurched back to life with a cough. The lights blinked. The coffee maker remembered its sentence and finished it. The clock hummed like a waking bee. A cheer rose, small and honest. The room's shoulders dropped an inch. Pine, the code officer, stood in the doorway with a patrolman at either elbow, wet from the rain and dry in the eyes in that way men get when their certainties have been wrung out. He looked at Ria, then at the half-peeled red tag between his fingers, and lowered his hand, the adhesive going dull in the air. Voss finished, returned the phone to Ria. "He'll call back on a clean line," she said. "He gave me enough to name names in a warrant request. I still need your statement." Ria nodded. "Here, if you can spare 10 minutes now, yes. Then we schedule a longer sit-down off-site." Voss's gaze scanned the room, the faces that had borne witness to so many meals and small resurrections. "And Ms. Calder, thank you. People like Ward get away with it because good people decide not to make a mess." "We make pancakes," Tala said. "Different kind of mess. 10 minutes became 15, then 30, factual, careful, anchored by dates scribbled on Ria's invoices and times stamped on receipts. Who came, who said what, who flashed what authority and why it felt wrong. Voss listened like a surgeon, precise, unsentimental, with a reverence for what could be saved. When the questions paused, Ria rubbed her forearms where the cold had settled during the outage. "What happens now?" "Now," Voss said, "I go right. I put ink where breath was, and I ask a judge for teeth. If I get them, Ward will have a very bad morning soon." She glanced at Pine, who was being led gently but firmly toward a cruiser. "And some others will discover that being useful to money is not the same as being safe." The agents left without drama. The door shut. The bell made a normal sound that suddenly felt revolutionary. Thatch leaned both palms on the counter and blew out a breath that tried to be a laugh and landed somewhere close to prayer. "I'm too old for this much plot," he said. "You're 38, Tala said. "I have the soul of a Victorian Ottoman," he said, "stuffed to bursting and not meant for upheaval." Ria stacked cups with a care that tried to convince her hands they were not shaking. The receipt in the register glowed like a lighthouse in a fog of variables. 10,000 had been a rope. Now there were other ropes, injunctions and affidavits and men with red tags who might or might not return with friends. She turned and found half the neighborhood watching her, not to demand leadership, but to offer their eyes like spare lanterns. She squared her shoulders. "We close in 15, she said. "Then we sleep. Tomorrow we open. We are not a skirmish. We are a schedule." They laughed. The laughter landed like nails in a frame. Sleep ran through Ria like a river that had forgotten drought. She dreamed of chrome that turned to silver fish and swam upriver, of envelopes that sprouted roots and held a building fast, of a raven stitched on a shoulder lifting its wings. Her alarm rose her into a pale morning that could not yet decide whether it was winter. She dressed, tied her apron with a square knot, because her father always said square knots hold when everything else lets go, and unlocked the diner to the smell of cold metal and yesterday's hope. The world outside felt like a held breath. 9, a reporter arrived, local, kind eyes, a pen that clicked when she was nervous. She ordered coffee, paid, and asked if Ria would go on camera. Ria said no. Tala said, absolutely not. Thatch, betrayed by his own curiosity, said, maybe, just a little. They compromised. The camera filmed hands pouring coffee and a chalkboard that read, open like a heart. The video aired at noon. By 2, a line formed that looked less like commerce and more like a vigil done with forks. People paid for their own food and for strangers. Someone slid a white envelope across the counter that contained a stack of ones and a single photograph of a grandfather in a booth in 1979 with a note. He would want this. At 3, Caleb texted from a number that disappeared when she looked. Away. Safe for now. Tell Tala the CPA swears in iambic pentameter. Ria smiled into her apron and did not cry in the walk-in. At 4, Voss called. We got the warrant, she said. We're serving it. The judge liked my verbs. She paused. Stay alert. When animals are cornered, they either bite or run. We have pie tins, Ria said, and witnesses. Sometimes, Voss said, that's more armor than Kevlar. The bite came at closing. A storm had gathered itself without rain, just pressure, the way grief sits low on a day and weighs the light. The last table left, with good nights that sounded like vows. Tala washed the final pan. Thatch counted the drawer, humming the way people hum when they are talking themselves into optimism. The bell rang. One man, no clipboard, no badge, a jacket. That cost exactly enough to vanish in a crowd and boots that tasted like oil. He had Ward's impatience without his smile. We're closed, Ria said, not unkindly. He locked the door behind him with a casual flick. The sound of the deadbolt sliding was small and enormous. Tala set her pan down very gently. The man walked forward, hands visible, empty, dangerous. You're Ria, he said. Good. Saves time. He reached into his jacket and Ria's. Breath did something primitive, stopped to make room for running, until he drew out a padded envelope and dropped it on the counter. It made a dull sound, not money. Metal. From Mr. Ward, he said. A gift for your friend with the raven. Ria. Didn't touch it. I don't accept gifts from men who lock my door. Smart. He smiled without using his eyes. Pass the message then. He has 2 choices. Keep running or come meet the man who can make this all go away. Tonight, 10 o'clock, Riverfront, South Pier. He tapped the envelope. Proof. We're serious. What's in there? Thatch asked, because some men cannot help interrogating the thunder. The man's smile widened. Something he lost a long time ago. He turned, unlocked the door with the key he should not have had, and left, the bell ring sounding insulted. Ria stared at the envelope. Tala whispered, Don't. Don't what? Don't open it. Don't call the number you don't. Don't go to Piers after dark. Ria nodded and picked up the envelope, like she was holding the thin, bitter heart of a trap. It was heavier than a letter and lighter than a solution. She weighed it, set it down, weighed it again with her eyes. Then she pulled her phone, snapped a photo, texted Voss. Delivery. South Pier, 10 p.m. Ward's runner. Voss's reply. Came fast. Do not meet, do not open, wait for me. Ria stared at the clock. 9:11. Caleb's first text since noon arrived. You okay? She typed, deleted, typed again. Runner came, package. Ward wants you at the river at 10, 3 dots long. Then, not surprised. Another bubble. If I don't go, people get hurt. If I do, I might not walk back. Voss is en route, Ria wrote. She says don't go. Another long pause. He'll send someone else to prove a point. Ria looked at Tala, who looked back with a fury made of love. Thatch spoke to the ceiling. I am opposed to narratives that involve peers. 34. The room held its breath. Voss arrived at 9:41, with 2 cars, 4 agents, and a plan she delivered in 3 sentences that made Ria want to applaud. We intercept. We wire the envelope for prints and DNA. We watch the pier. We do not let Ms. Calder die for anyone's moral arc. Seconded, Tala said. The agents dusted, swabbed, logged, sealed. The envelope yielded a man's watch with a cracked face and a raven etched on its back. Old, heavy, the kind of object that remembers wrists and roads. Ria felt something in her chest pulled tight with a sound she did not let out. His father's, Voss guessed, reading Ria's face and the way grief knows an heirloom when it sees one. They're baiting him with his past. The team split, 2 to the pier, 1 to stay with Ria and Tala. Voss squeezed Ria's shoulder. Doors locked, lights low. If Ward himself shows up, do not try to convert him with pancakes. I make no promises, Ria said. At 10:19, Ria's phone lit. Unknown caller. Her bones knew the number like weather. She answered. I'm near, Caleb said. I can see the river. I can see 2 people who think they're invisible, and 3 who know they're not. Agent Voss is there, Ria said. Don't be a hero, be a witness. A soft laugh. Ria, he said, and in her name he fit gratitude, apology, and the shimmering thread of something that could grow if the world allowed. If I don't, she said. Finish that sentence when you're here and the coffee is loud. She set the phone on the counter, speaker on, breath slowed. Tala leaned against the door, arms crossed, as if she could hold the building shut by posture alone. Thatch paced the length of the counter exactly 8 times and then, realizing he'd done it, stood still on purpose. Caleb's voice through the speaker. I see Ward, or what money wears when it doesn't want to get its suit wet. Voss's voice faint, distant, through someone else's radio. Positions, wait! The river made its soft, secret noises. A gull cried once, insulted by human drama. Footsteps, an exchange too quiet to pass. Then Voss again, amplified. Federal, agents, hands where I can see them. Chaos has a signature sound, metal on concrete, breath running, the soft grunt of a body making an unwilling choice. Ria gripped the edge of the counter until wood pressed crescents into her palms. Tala whispered a curse that was also a prayer. Caleb, Ria said, a breath. Then, I'm here. A pause. He ran. Ward ran. Not far. Bad shoes. Another. Voice Voss's closer. We have him. Repeat, we have him. The room sagged like a tent after wind gives up. Are you... Ria began. I'm not bleeding, Caleb said. Someone else is. Pride. Maybe an elbow. Ria closed her eyes and let 2 seconds of tears rise and fall without leaving her lashes. Come back, she said. Not tonight, not now, when you can, when it's clean. I will, he said. I promise on a watch I haven't worn since I was 19. About that, Tala said, leaning into the phone with a smile. Good here. We have something that ticks. Ward's arrest cast a long shadow, and then, surprisingly, a light. The next morning, the paper ran a photo of Voss leading him across the pier in handcuffs, wet hair plastered to his forehead. The headline, less interested in funding models than in the small miracle of a diner that had refused to unlatch its soul. The code office called to schedule a legitimate reinspection. Pine had resigned. The grease trap service arrived early and left with the kind of paperwork that made men like Thatch sleep. Ria worked without pausing long enough to decide whether she was happy. Happiness felt too fragile to examine. She settled for present and found present large enough to hold everything. In the afternoon, a courier arrived with an envelope addressed in the careful handwriting Ria recognized from a florist's note. No return address. Inside, the watch, cleaned, the crack in the face left as an honest scar, and a single line on an index card. The things that keep time don't always tell it. Chi. She held the watch a long time before she set it inside. The pie case on display between lemon meringue and chocolate silk on a little stand Tala fashioned from a spoon. "So we remember," she said, "what nearly bought us, what we didn't sell." Evening turned the windows to mirrors. Ria caught herself in one, apron, tired eyes, mouth that learned its own strength. She thought of her father, of Lila, of her mother asleep 2 bus lines away. She thought of the first time she had comped a meal with her own rent clinging to her ribs like a tight shirt. She placed the day among the others and found it heavier, not in a way that bent her, but in a way that taught her posture. The bell rang. The shape in the door was familiar, the way you recognize a song before the first lyric. Leather jacket, raven shoulder, helmet in one hand. The other held a bouquet that looked like the florist had been given 2 instructions: joy and roadside. Wild! Caleb paused just inside the threshold, as if asking the room's permission to be welcomed. The room, which had already decided what to do with him, cheered. Ria laughed. It came out like a door opening. "You're late," she said. "I got lost," he said. "On purpose." He nodded toward the pie case. "You saved it." It did," Ria said. "We save things here." He offered the bouquet, clumsy with tenderness. She took it, set it in water, and turned back before gratitude could make her impractical. "You hungry?" "Always." She poured coffee. He took the stool at the end of the counter like it had been reserved since the day she comped his pancakes. He reached for the watch through the glass and did not touch it, the way you do at a museum when reverence is better than possession. "It was my father's," he said. "He said it ran 5 minutes fast so I'd never be late to my life. I hated it then. I like it now." "Good," Ria said. "We've been early to too many things that hurt." They ate soup. They shared quiet. Tala pretended not to watch and failed with comic grace. Thatch updated the mop schedule as if it were a chessboard strategy. When the dinner rush primed and then eased, Caleb cleared his throat, the soft cough of a man stepping into unarmored ground. "I was going to leave," he said. "Not the road, the story. I've been leaving stories. For a long time, when they get to the part where I'm supposed to stay." "And?" Ria asked, wiping a clean spot that had not needed wiping. "And I was wrong about what staying means. It isn't a trap. It's a choice you keep choosing." He glanced at the window, where the Blue Aster's name reflected itself into the dark. "If you don't mind, I'd like to keep choosing this place." He lifted his eyes to hers, the courage there a precise, beautiful thing. "And you?" Ria considered the roof, the rent, the barbershop jar, the calendar of community, nights, the watch that ticked for people who no longer needed it to, the way her mother's breathing had sounded easy on the phone that morning. She considered the sound of engines arriving like rain and leaving like promise. "Yes," she said. "But understand—" "I know," he said. "We don't own each other. We stand next to each other when the power goes out." He grinned. "You talk pretty when you threaten me with terms." She smiled back. It hurt a little in a way that meant a muscle was finally being used for what it had been built for. News trickled in over the next days like a river corrected. Ward resigned from the Development Corporation to spend time with his family, which the paper printed without comment and the neighborhood read with a chorus of elegant swears. 2 council members announced ethics reviews. Voss stopped by once, bought coffee she did not drink, and left Ria with a look that said, "We did a hard thing the right way." The landlord called, voice suddenly cautious where before it had been condescending. "I didn't know," he said. About the bribery. We'll talk about a longer lease. We'll talk about a fair one, Ria said. They did. The block formed an association so competent it surprised itself. The barbershop jar became a foundation with a bank account and bylaws. The high schooler won a regional award for documentary short and gave his acceptance speech at the diner because the auditorium felt too clean. On a Thursday afternoon that smelled like cinnamon and mop soap, Ria stepped outside with 2 cups of coffee and found Caleb tuning his bike by feel, the way some men pray. She handed him a cup. You leaving? She asked. For the day, he said. There's a widow out past mile marker 12 whose fence fell last week and who will never ask for help. I thought I'd go remind her that fences are happier upright. Take Tala's cookies, Ria said. They establish goodwill. He strapped the tin to the back with a stretch of bungee cord that had seen things. He looked at the window, at the reflection of the woman who had handed him mercy, and then refused to let it make her soft. I'll be back before close. Don't be, she said, meaning, come back when you're ready. We'll be here either way. He saluted with the coffee, kicked the bike alive, and left a note on the air that smelled like future and fuel. Inside, Ria reset the pie case. She checked the watch. It ticked. The door opened and a kid about 12 stood there, damp and shy, holding a handful of nickels. My sister says I can get a hot chocolate here, even if I'm short. You can, Ria said, and did the math that always favored the hungry. She poured. The kid wrapped both hands around the mug like prayer around a promise. The bell rang again. The room filled. Life did what it had always done when given a table and a little patience. It multiplied. Ria stood at the center of it, a woman wearing an apron like a cape, an accountant's brain, a pastor's kindness, a boxer's chin. The world was still dangerous. Men like Ward always found new names. Power went out. Red tags lurked. But the Blue Aster had a different kind of grid now. People wired to people, witness braided to welcome, love plugged into the ordinary. She made change. She made coffee. She made the choice, again and again, to belong. And when the bell over the door jangled in that familiar, nervous way, she smiled, because even the anxious things in this place had learned how to sing. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.